ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं कर्वावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः ॐ सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मत् आचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम् ॐ गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णुः गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परं ब्रह्म तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। ॐ सरस्वती नमस्तुभ्यं वरदे कामरूपिणी विद्यारम्भं करिष्यामि सिद्धिर्भवतु मे सदा। कार्पण्यदोषोपहतः स्वभावः पृच्छामि त्वां धर्मसम्मूढचेताः यक्षेयह्यान् निश्चितं ब्रूहि तन्मे शिष्यस्तेऽहं शाधिमां त्वां प्रपन्नम्। ॐ वाङ्मे मनसि प्रतिष्ठिता मनो मे वाचि प्रतिष्ठितम् आविर्मयेदि वेदस्य माणि स्तः श्रुतं मे मा प्रहासीः अनेन अधीतेन अहोरात्रान् सन्ततामि ऋतं वदिष्यामि सत्यं वदिष्यामि तन्मामवतु तद्वक्तारम् अवतु अवतु मामवतु वक्तारम् अवतु वक्तारम्। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। ॐ भद्रं कर्णेभिः शृणुयाम देवाः भद्रं पक्ष्येमाक्षभिर्यजत्राः स्थिरैरङ्गैः तुष्टुवाग्वं सस्तनूभिः व्यशेम देवहितं यदायुः स्वस्ति न इन्द्रो वृतश्रवाः स्वस्ति न पूषा विश्ववेदाः स्वस्ति नस्ताक्ष्यो अरिष्टनेमिः स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्ददातु। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। ॐ अहं वृक्षस्य रेरिव कीर्तिप्रीष्टं गिरिरिव ऊर्ध्व पवित्रो वाजिनीव स्वमृतमस्मि द्रविणग्वं सवर्सचं सुमेध अमृतोक्षितः इति त्रिशङ्कोर्वेदानुवचनम्। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः।
Amazing, Kavita. It was flawless. Very, very nice.
Thank you.
You can try and reduce the speed a little bit, but other than that, it was brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. Next time I'll.
It was amazing, amazing. Okay, so today we will start Shloka 17. Now, Shloka 16 is actually a continuation of this Shloka 17, so I'll talk a little bit more about that. But what we have done so far in chapter 8, right, after we understood the first few concepts of, Adhyatma, Karma, Adhyagya, we understood some of those concepts, right? And after that, from Shloka 5, 6, 7 onwards, all the way to Shloka 10, Bhagwanji told us about how to, so here we are trying to get to the Akshar Brahma, right? Akshar Brahma as in the ultimate unmanifest immutable being. So we are trying to understand him or how to reach him in the way he is, and he is immutable, and he's transcendental, he is avyakt, unmanifest, right? So he's told us how to even think about him or how to achieve him in the end, right? So what is important for us to understand is that in this form that we are in, the mutable form, the transient form, the manifest form, we have a lot of limitations associated with this. Because of these limitations, Kakuli will not be able. Okay. Okay. Understood. Thank you, Sanchita. Okay. So in this form that we are in today, we are not able to go past our limitations. There are limitations, right? So for us to actually understand his Akshar Brahma form, we have to be able to transcend these limitations, right? Now, in certain cases, the yogis are able to transcend the limitations using some or the other form of yoga. Okay, whether this is meditative yoga, or whether it is hatha yoga, or whether it is bhakti yoga, or whether it is gyan yoga, right? So different forms, they are able to transcend these limitations, and through that be connected to him. But there is one form or one point of time which all of us reach in our lives, which is at the time of death. When we leave this mortal coil, we have that moment where we are able to transcend all of these limitations, because we are shedding these limitations. We are shedding the limitations of our body and senses and everything, right? So Bhagwanji talks about at that particular point of time, which all of us have to experience no matter what we do, right? We all are going to get to that point. There are various ways in which in that moment we have a great opportunity to know him in that Akshar Brahma form, right? And to connect to him. So then he gives us 3 different ways in which, people get to that point at that end. So the first time he said is that, when he was explaining to us these basic concepts that he talked about, which are the subtler forms of the concept we've talked about before, he told us that there is a very special form, which is the ritualistic entity. The ritualistic entity being the adhiyagya concept, the adhiyagya. He says that, so first of all, yagya. Yagya is the way to reach him, right? To get past this maya, which is viratatya, which is very difficult to transcend without him. He says that yagya is the way back. Yagya was the path that got us from there to here, and yagya is the form to go back to him. The yagya, the energy, the entity that gives energy or gives rise to the concept of yagya is called adhiyagya. That's the ritualistic entity. So Bhagwanji says in Shlok 8, he says, in Shlok 8 or before that, in one Shloka, he basically says that I am the ritualistic entity. Yeah, so it was Shloka 4. He says, I am the ritualistic entity that sits in the bodies, in our self. Okay. And if we, and then in Shloka 7 to 10 onwards, he says that how do we realize this Adhi Yagya entity? How do we use the Adhi Yagya entity to reach the transcendental form? Okay. And there he told us that basically we have to follow certain rituals. We follow rituals, we do every activity we do, this becomes a ritualistic entity. And then now rituals have to go past the way we think about it, right? The first thing we think about a yagya or we think about a ritual is puja path or naam jap. So these are absolutely essential in this format, but you have to, why? Because these will then help us convert our everyday activities, whether these are conscious or unconscious activities, they also become rituals in their own right. Like the act of eating food is the act of a yagya, where you are giving the purnahuti of the food that we eat to the jataragni, the agni in the digestive fires in our bellies, right? So that is an example. Similarly, all our actions in our day-to-day life become a form of ritual that we do, right? And through that ritual, we are going to reach Bhagwanji at the time of death, right? So this was explained to us from all the way from 6, 7, all the way to 10. Okay. And what was the attainment of this Adhiyagya through Abhyas Yoga? So Abhyas Yoga is part of everything. Every yoga that we undertake, Abhyas Yoga is a core component of it. Because anything and everything we do, it has to come by way of practice. There's no getting away from it, right? So he then tells us in Shloka 9 and 10, what are the attainments? Okay, so then he talked about that attainment. Then he went on to say, okay, if there are certain yogis who will try to get to him in his immutable supreme form, the transcendental form, and that was through the yoga of meditation, and then there are precursors to it. So such yogis must already be adept in their knowledge of Vedas. They must be completely free of passions, of worldly enjoyments. Such people must practice continence. They must get full control of their chakras, and then they meditate to increase their consciousness and take it from the lower consciousness level to all the way to Agya chakra, right? Again, practice through meditative practice. So Abhyas Yoga is here as well. So the people coming from different ways, right? There is in the first form of activity, you are converting everything you do into a ritual, and thereby connecting to the ritualistic entity, by connecting to the adhyagya aspect of Bhagwanji. And in the second format, you're basically, in the form of everyday activity, you're basically doing meditation, and you're focusing on raising your Kundalini energy from the lower chakras to the higher chakras, right? But that energy of Kundalini, that meditation will not go anywhere unless the precursors are already set in place. The precursors being, knowledge of Vedas, and then, ability to have full control over your desires, being dispassionate, but not disinterested. Very different concepts, right? We had focused on that as well. We need to be dispassionate but not disinterested. If anything, we have to be even more interested with the dispassion than what the usual people with their worldly desires would show in their activities, right? Then the third form that we came around was the third was from 13th, 14th onwards all the way to 16th, right? So 15th. So we talked about how, there would be control over your sense inlets. Then there is going to be fixity of mind. There is going to be utterance of Om. So this is like form of a Nam Jap, right? And how you use that form to get to Bhagwanji as well, right? And then he talks about, okay, so when you're doing all of these things, what happens, right? We are going to come and realize that. And then he also talked about in the end, in Shloka 14, 15 onwards, he says, okay, now there are people who are going to do all of these things, but there are also common people in this world who do not have access, who do not have time, who do not have luxury. See, doing all of these things are luxuries, huh? Bhagwanji's grace. To be able to do Nam Jap, to be able to do scriptural reading, to be able to get that gyan, to be able to get the guru, to be able to have that time on your hand where you don't have to go and work, right? If you are not allowed time off from your work to be able to do these scriptural studies, how will you attain that gyan, right? So it is very few who are graced with this prasad from Bhagwanji ki yaar, you can sit down and do this. There are so many of us who are, all they are trying to do is to make their ends meet, to make sure that their loved ones get the medical care, right? It's not easy. So for those people, how will that work? So Bhagwanji says, don't worry. You can continue to do your daily activities, but you don't have to do anything, no meditation required, no rituals required, none of that required, except that you should be doing the activities of the world with constant remembrance of me. Okay? Remember me at all times, and just that remembrance, constantly thinking of me when you're doing your activities, mind and buddhi in Bhagwanji and body in Sansar. If that's how you do your everyday activities, that is enough for you to realize me. In this also, Abhyas Yoga is there, because your mind and your intellect has to be in Bhagwanji, meaning like you have to be constantly only doing that, right? There's a lot of effort and abhyas that you need to do that. Otherwise, we know how our mind fluctuates and is constantly running after daily enjoyments, right? So Bhagwanji is saying that you can, that highest self that yogis are acquiring, or the adepts are acquiring, or people who are doing constant rituals are acquiring, which requires so much of time, so much of resources, all of those things. If you don't have also, you can still get to the same attainment that these people, these blessed people have by simply doing your activities of daily life, by remembering him. Man ma manusmar yuddhacha, right? And then what is that attainment? The attainment is that they all have a realization which will take people away from the cycle of birth and death. Right now, what is this cycle of birth and death? Right now, Bhagwanji will talk a little bit more about it so that we have a little bit of context. Right, in our limited life, we don't have a context of what kind of cycle or what kind of suffering are we trying to avert here. Right, we don't understand. It just feels like, yeah, there is just this life and all of that stuff. Now he will tell us the extent of suffering we have to go through and understand what is the value of this life that Bhagwanji has given us. We cannot throw it away, and we do not understand how precious something is in our hands, right? It's like somebody digging. He all he does is dig the earth to create something. All he does is this mud digging, and in that he finds a diamond, the most precious diamond in the world. And for him, it is just a kaach ka tukda. He doesn't understand the value of it. It's only a Johari who will be able to really appreciate what this diamond really is, or what kind of a gem this really is. So now he's trying to explain to us what a gem and how important, how precious this human life is. He's trying to give us that appreciation, that eye of a Johari, which we do not necessarily have at this stage, right? So it is with that understanding. Now, what we have to understand, how should we listen, and how should we try and understand the next few shlokas, starting from shloka 16. The view should be simultaneously macro and micro. Okay, what we are going to talk about is the macro view. We have to constantly strive to see what does it mean to me, how does it connect to my me story. Okay, there is a macro view. We are holograms. We are created in the image of God. So whatever God does, we can do as well. Whatever he does at a cosmic scale happens inside of us at a micro scale. Everything. It is an exact hologram. So we have to understand it from that concept. Whatever we are going to talk about, the Swarglok, the realms, the lokas, 14 lokas, they exist outside. And there is a play that is happening at a very grand scale. And at the same time, that whole play and those 14 lokas exist inside of us, in our bodies. Now, body doesn't only mean physical body, right? In our subtler bodies also. They exist. We live in them. We experience them at a micro scale. So we have to be able to understand them both at a grand scale, the cosmic scale at which that's the game of the Lord. But we have to understand that the Jivatma inside of us experiences the same thing and goes through the same experience at every level. Now, in our own lives, there are many cycles or many scales. For us, the grandest scale is our entire human lifespan. So this entire thing is being played at that grand scale. Then slow, if you keep it making micro, you will start to see that the whole thing goes on our daily lives. So that there are many cycles, but the cycles are repeating in exactly the same quality, only the quantity differs. Okay, but the quality of cycles, the concept of the cycles exists every second. And that's the view you need to take for when we read through these shlokas. And then always connect them back to your me story. If you are not connecting it back to my me story of what it means to me in my daily life, how does it change how I behave? How does it impact and how does it increase my understanding of who I am on a daily basis? How does it improve my understanding? How does it improve my gyan, which I can then reflect in my actions on a daily basis? Then all we've done is listen to a pravachan. We are not here for pravachan. We have to go past that. Okay, so connect it back to your me story, increase your gyan of everyday activities. Okay, so in shloka 16, we did the realms of the lokas, right? And we understood that there are 7 higher lokas and 7 lower lokas, right? The Netherlands and the higher lands, right? And then there is this Bhulok. Bhulok is where we are on a neutral basis. So you understand them from a mental view. So these lokas exist in our subtle bodies, and mentally and emotionally we get to these lokas. And sometimes there are of course experiences at a physical level also, gross level also. But on a daily basis, based on our activities, we experience different types of felicities or different types of hells. Each of these felicities that we experience falls in one of the 7 higher lokas. And as the lokas go higher towards Brahmalok, the length of time for which the lok exists is longer. So the quality of felicity, the higher the quality of the felicity, the longer it lasts. The lower the quality of the felicity, the shorter it lasts, and then we get out of it. Right? So when you start experiencing that, you will see, right? So you have Bhulok, Bhuvarlok, Swarglok is only third on top, and everybody says we have to get to Swarglok, right? Where Indra lives. You will realize how small that felicity is when you see the vastness of the experience that exists beyond that, right? You have Mahalok, you have Janalok, Tapolok, and Brahmalok. Brahmalok is the considered really, really high, right? Brahmalok is where your Brahma lives, where Vishnuji lives, and we talk of that. And then there is a lok beyond that, which is Satyalok, which is the lok that is immutable, transcendental, and that's the highest lok. Once you get there, that is where we need to go to, not to the lower forms of loka, which all of them revert back. They all revert back to the human form. They all have a finite time to them. So all felicities, whether it is happiness, whether it is a higher quality of bliss, a higher quality of calmness, right? Calmness also you will experiences of different qualities. There is a quality of calmness you experience when you, if you just do a little bit of puja, there is some calmness that accrues from it. You do a higher level of, work for which will give you a higher level of calmness when you attend to your duties towards your family, towards your colleagues, towards your office work. You do that, and the more difficult the work, the higher the amount of satisfaction, contentment, happiness that accrues from it, right? And they take us to a space of calmness, peace, and happiness that belongs to these higher lokas. Okay. And then also on the other side, when we do certain activities that can create anxiety, anger, fear, whenever we indulge with our vasanas, essentially, that's how it works. We indulge in our vasanas, our desires, petty desires, they eventually will take us to the lower lokas. Always, always to the lower lokas. And even though it feels like, there are certain physical pleasures that we acquire, eventually they all get us to some form of anger, upset, annoyance, anxiety, stress, fear, right? They take us into these various lokas for different varying lengths of time. And we have a lot of times experienced certain tortures of these hell over a very long period of time, especially those related to our sense of shame, guilt, of who we are or what we have done, shame of ourselves, whether it is, when these kind of tortures of hell, most often when they are unchecked, untalked, unrecognized, they follow us through an entire lifetime. I am not good enough. I am not worthy of love. These kind of, or shame or guilt that accrues from these type of questions, we all experience them in some format or some quality or the other, and they stay with us our entire lives. These are tortures of hell, right? So this is when we are connecting it back to our daily lives of what it means. Okay. Now with that understanding, let's go to the 17th shloka. Okay. Smita, will you read with us?
Sure. I'll start with the connection. The duration of Brahmalok is now described by the Lord.
Sahasra Yuga Paryantam.
Sahasra Yuga Paryantam.
Aharyat Brahmano Viduhu.
Aharyat Brahmano Viduhu.
Ratrim Yuga Sahasrantam.
Ratrim Yuga Sahasrantam.
Teho Ratra Vido Janaha.
Teho Ratra Vido Janaha.
Sahasra is basically means 1,000. Okay, so Sahasra Yug Paryantam is for 1000 cycles, 1000 yugas. Okay, 1000 cycles. Aharya is 1 day of who? Of Brahma. Viduhu, those who know the essence, those who know the Tattva Gyan. Ratri, night. Yug Sahasrantam, again, which means the duration of 1000 cycles. Te horatra vido janaha. Janaha is the yogi jan. Vido is to know. Know what? Know aho and ratra. Know the day and night. Know the reality of day and night, which means they know the reality of Kal. They know the reality of time.
The self-realized yogis who know Brahma's day as having a duration of 1000 cycles, Mahayuga, and his night also having a duration of 1000 cycles, know the reality of day and night. The duration of Brahmalok. Tradition gives an estimate of the duration of Brahmalok. Each cycle consists of 4 aeons, yugas, as below. The aeon of Kali Yug, 4,32,000 human years. The aeon of Dwapar Yug, which is 8,64,000 human years. The aeon of Treta Yug, which is 12,96,000 human years. And the aeon of Satya Yug, which is 17,28,000 human years. A total of 43,20,000 human years. This total period of 43,20,000 human years is called Mahayuga, or a divine cycle. 1000 such cycles constitute 1 day of Brahma and 1 night of similar duration. In 1 day of Brahma, 14 Indras succeed each other. Indra is the presiding deity of heaven. From this, it can be seen how small is the felicity of heaven compared to that of Brahmalok. In short, however large the stockpile of righteous acts and the merit accrued, it would always have a beginning and an end. When it ends, birth in human form follows again. Compared to this huge duration, the span of human life is very small. The importance and value of human life lies in the fact that this momentary span affords the opportunity of transcending the cycle of births and deaths of thousands of eons of realization of the self. In the second line of Shlok, it is said that those who even Brahmalok to be one of the limited duration, in fact know the reality of day and night. It means that a person who is not attracted by the expectation of enjoyments of even the highest heavens, and who knows the correct use of momentary human life, indeed knows the truth about time. This truth is that being of a finite duration, time has a beginning and an end. The self, on the other hand, transcends time.
Thank you. So um, these numbers obviously sound mind-boggling, right? To human, especially to our human brain. In fact, most of us, the way our intellect and our brain is designed, we can only remember things up to a certain years back. And even in our childhood, everything we've experienced, if you write down all your memories, it will be probably about 20 odd memories. Rest we've forgotten, right? Similarly, in our adult life, even though we experience so much and so many things, we tend to remember things in a very small time frame. So our mind doesn't have the capacity to understand this level of time, right? Like even our lives, even we as in this form will be remembered for a maximum of 100 years. After that, our existence completely is forgotten. Just like our kids today don't remember their grandparents or great-grandparents that regularly. Grandparents to fir bhi karte hain, but great-grandparents no. Right? So it's difficult for us to fathom the time that exists here. But it's also so the way to look at this is think of a mosquito or an ant. They live for 24 to 48 hours. In that, they've been a baby, they've reached full maturity, they have learned to live as part of a colony, they have learned to procreate, they've reached old age, and then they die. 24 hours. In 24 hours, they've experienced all of life that we experience in 80 years or 90 years. Right? Now, if you tell the fly that, or if you tell the ant that, hey, we live for 80 years, for them, it's impossible to imagine how slowly we do things. It is impossible for them to even think, bhai, what do you do for 80 years? Hum to 24 hours mein sab kar lete hain. Right? So it's very difficult for that little fly or insect or ant to imagine those 80 years. Similarly, it is very difficult for us to imagine these numbers on the paper. Right? So ours is not to try and understand or visualize or intellectually even make sense of a lot of these things. It is to appreciate one element of the Tattva Gyan, the Tattva Gyan which was shared in chapter 2. Chapter 2, as soon as Bhagavan Shri Krishna starts speaking, he starts releasing Tattva Gyan, which is the universal ultimate knowledge. In the Tattva Gyan, the one analogy that you may remember or recall is the analogy of clothes. That just like you change your clothes every day, you've shed many bodies. And just like we won't cry about clothes getting old and thrown, we shouldn't cry about the bodies. Right? Of course, we don't remember any of this. But that Tattva Gyan, that everything has a beginning, and everything has an end, and it moves in that cycle. And this exists not just for you and me, it exists not just for us on planet Earth. Bhagwanji is saying this is the essence of all creation. As long as there is creation, there will be destruction. And then they will come back to creation. Right? That cycle we cannot escape. Right? So that's the main takeaway, that everything that we will do, it is necessarily start of something new, which creates, ultimately also we have to let go of. Can I add something else?
Okay. So,
sorry, just wanted to add, sorry, I'm still in transit, some background noise may be there. So just wanted to add one mind-boggling thing that I've read pretty recently. The Hubble telescope that has identified, now it is going back, even the science is correlating with whatever spiritual science that we are talking about, right? Essentially, the Hubble telescope is kind of like able to map back to several days. Even if it can travel farther outer space, it can actually go back till this thing, the black hole theory,
Big Bang.
the Big Bang theory itself. So that's the one that they had been telling. Typically, the sunlight takes about 8 minutes to reach Earth, whereas it can reach in about 7 minutes in Venus and 6 minutes in Mercury. I'm not accurate, but that's a kind of thing. So if you travel a lot of outer space, you can have more past visibility. That's the way that they are talking right now, which kind of like correlate. When you are talking about yogic science, you are doing like your Sakasra and you're reaching outer space, you will be able to map back like lot more things. So that is what has been written in our scriptures also. That's kind of like getting correlated with the science, with all the latest technologies that we have currently. So that was kind of mesmerizing me, like how we were much far ahead than the so-called like so modern science and time that we are living in currently.
I mean, that's very true, right? Like, I think we find spirituality and some of these things in the scriptures mind-boggling. Looking at space itself is mind-boggling for us, and we understand nothing about it almost. We haven't even left our planet for all practical purposes. Everything we're seeing is 2D or 3D images, which is like very little data we're taking out of it, and that also we can't seem to comprehend. So there is a whole cosmic creation, which is, again, it's not meant for us to fully understand, but it's meant for us to appreciate that the Tattva Gyan that he's talking about in this book applies to all cycles, right? And it's not just us, and we are part of that creation.
Yeah, so this, like both of them have just described, right? Here we're going to try and understand the enormity of what's at play, right? The enormity of what's at play, if we try and understand that, one, to understand the significance or the insignificance of who we really are, and what our role is in this whole cosmic universe, right? So that is one, which hopefully will lead us to humility, and help us understand, how insignificant our ego ideally should be in the light of everything else. But secondly, also, we have to try and connect it again back to my me story. What does it mean to me in my daily lives? If 43,20,000 human years, what does this even mean? What does this cycle mean, right? So let's try and understand this a little bit, right? At a pretty high level, let's try and appreciate this in a small way. The first thing to note is that if you look at the number of years that are described here, Kali Yuga, if you 4,32,000 years, right? The next one is Dwapar Yuga. Dwapar Yuga is twice the size of Kali Yuga, twice the time length, 8,64,000. Treta Yuga is 3 times that of Kali Yuga, and Satyuga is 4 times that of Kali Yuga. And all 4 of these yugas, once they play out in succession, it creates one cycle, just one cycle, right? And this is called Mahayuga. So out of one Mahayuga, 40% of the time of Mahayuga is spent in Satyayuga, and only 10% is spent in Kali Yuga. And once this one Mahayuga happens, then the second Mahayuga starts. 1,000 such Mahayugas is 1 day of Brahma. And 1,000 such Mahayugas is the length of 1 night of Brahma. And then there is a lifetime of Brahma at the end of his lifetime. So what happens? The Puranas tell us that in 1 day of Brahma, right? So he's wake up and everything happens. There is the creation goes through these 1,000 cycles of yugas. After that, when he goes to sleep, there is going to be a dissolution. There is going to be a pralaya. Okay, we'll get into more details in the next shloka, but there's basically going to be pralaya, and the entire creation gets dissolved, and it goes into its a subtle form. When he wakes up again after 1,000 yugas, then the creation comes forth again. Okay, and then it plays out again for 1,000 yugas. Now that happens, right? Now within that 1 day, 14 Indras come to preside over Swarlo. 14 Indras. So the Indra is not a person. Indra is a concept. He's the presiding deity. So when you actually read Puranas, you will realize these various stories of like this person then became Indra, and he became Indra after this, right? Like, so there are people that are recognized in the stories of Puranas as what type of, like, at what point of time were they Indras, okay? So now notice cycles, right? These cycles is what creates the concept of time. If there are no cycles, there is no concept of time. And from our perspective, we had understood when we were reading about time earlier in the scriptures, earlier in Gita, our concept of time comes from the fact that there is the cycle of day and night. There is a cycle of earth going around the sun, where we say that this is a year, right? These are the concepts of cycles that create a sense of time for us. If you put a person inside a kalkotri where he has no idea whether it's day or night, he is unable to track time. And then they say that people eventually, they hallucinate or whatever. They have no sense of Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. They have no sense of night or day. And their entire system goes for a toss, because our system, our physiology is built around a cycle. Everything is based on cycles in this world. Okay. And then there is a cycle of our birth and death. Right? So how do we break out? Like Bhagwanji is beyond time. We always say the Lord is beyond time. Why is he beyond time? He's beyond time because he's not bound by any cycles. He is beyond all of these yugas and mahayugas. So even here, Brahma himself is a part of a cycle. Right? So even he is part of cycle. He may be a subtle form. Now Brahma, and then from Brahma comes Brahma. Brahma is the Sagun Nirakar form of Brahma. Sagun Nirakar. He is Nirakar because Brahma, when we talk of Brahma, we talk about the creative potential of this universe. Right? So he is the potential, and hence he's imbued with the gunas. So Brahma becomes Brahma. Brahma comes forth when Brahma takes on the Rajoguni aspect. Okay, so when Brahma, the Nirguna Nirakar, takes on the guna of Rajogun, he becomes the Sagun Nirakar aspect, which is Brahma. He is the potential, and that potential, when it starts to realize, this creation gets formed. Okay, and then when he goes to sleep, then we said, there is going to be the dissolution, right? Now in all of this, you can see human lifespan is so small, very, very small compared to these lakhs of years. This is the only form in which we get to escape. We take that velocity, the escape velocity, to get out of these cycles. And this is the only time when we get to do this. So imagine how precious this human life is. 70, 80, 100 years that we have in our lives. In that lifetime, 43,20,000 years of bondage can be broken. And this 43,000 is just one Mahayuga. Imagine 1,000 cycles of this put atop of that is one day of Brahma, one night of Brahma, and then make that into what is lifespan of Brahma. Brahma also comes to an end. And when Brahma comes to an end, then we have a Mahapralaya, that even Brahma goes back to Brahma. And then the new cycle begins anew. So allow the enormity of this to sink in and understand how precious these few years are and how much power is there in this life form. And that is why constantly there is this reminder that you do not waste this extremely precious time in following petty animalistic desires. If Bhagwanji has given you this because you have the potential to now, you have in some way or the other, you have closed out a lot of your prarabdha, which you had to go through, and now you've been given an opportunity to get out. Use this to learn, to understand, get the gyan, and get out of this whole cycle.
Veena, how does this also relate to the 84 lakh life cycles that we all have to take to reach the human form? And what does, I mean, in layman's term, what does Brahma or Mahayug refer to?
Sure. So 84 lakh are different types of life forms that we can take. These 84 life forms may not, like, they all have different timelines. So some of them exist only for a few seconds to exhaust their prarabdha that they had to exhaust only in that life form. Some of them have, like, few days to live, few hours to live, right? So 84 lakh life forms are the different types. They represent different types of intellect, different types of vasanas, different types of consciousness, basically. So there are 84 lakh forms of consciousness that exist in this world. And depending on our gati, right, we've read in all of the shlokas so far that our consciousness, the state of our consciousness at the time of the death, determines what next birth will happen to us. because that next birth depends on our level of consciousness. So if you have a certain type of consciousness, which is determined by what is the quality of your thoughts, where you are absorbed, where your consciousness is absorbed, that will then determine which life form you take. It is in our hands, right? If our consciousness is absorbed in the thoughts of the Lord, then that's the gati we'll achieve. But we've also seen how it gets determined by all the activities, all the thoughts, all of our life quality that we have led up to the point of death. Yeah. So let's read ahead.
Oh, not-
Oh, we read the whole.
yeah, we read the whole thing.
We read the whole thing. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So then let me complete this thing. Couple of more things here, right? So Brahma, as we said, is the unmanifest or the mool prakriti, right? The sagun nirakar form, and he has the rajoguni bhav in it. Now, how does it relate to us, right? We are made in the image of the Lord. So when we are creating our life around us, we are Brahma. Okay. We wake up in the morning. When we go to sleep, we take on we take on tamoguni aspect, right? And we go to sleep, right? Then we wake up in the morning, we take on the rajoguni aspect, we become the Brahma, and through our daily activities, we start the creation around us. Correct? So that is how it relates to us. Every time you're creating something, whether you are creating food in a gross form, if I have to go back to that, you're creating food, you're being a Brahma. You're creating a child, you're being a Brahma. You're creating very life, right? You're creating a painting, you're creating a project, you are realizing a piece of software. Whatever you are doing, you are being in action as Brahma when you're creating something new. You're creating new thoughts, you're creating a new song, you're creating these are the aspects when you are being Brahma. And through that, at a larger level in your, so these are the activities you do on a daily activity. So you're taking on the form of Brahma in those, smaller form of Brahma in those smaller activities. But at a life level, at your entire lifespan level, you are taking the form of Brahma by creating the life. So take a responsibility for the life you are in today. The quality of your life is created by you through your, now not necessarily by only actions that you have created in this life, but also the actions that we have done over past lifetimes, right? All of that has accumulated to create the life today. And we have the same power to, if we don't like some aspect of our life, we have the power to change that as well. Okay. So that is us being a Brahma here. And then we have our days and nights, right? So similar to Brahma, the cosmic Brahma, we also have our days and nights. And at that point of time, our consciousness dissolves or gets created. So when we go to sleep, right, in every single moment, there is a pralay that happens. So this pralay is called the Nitya Pralay. Nitya Pralay is the two forms of Nitya Pralay. Nitya means constant dissolution. We are changing every moment of the day. Our cells are getting regenerated every single second. Our old cells are dying every single second. So in that moment of that, cells dying, or all of that is Nitya Pralay that's happening. On a daily basis, when we go to sleep, our consciousness dissolves, completely dissolves. We are like as if we are dead. That's how we sleep, right? So when we sleep, our consciousness dissolves. That's another form of Nitya Pralay. And then when we wake up, we create a new creation. Our consciousness comes forth anew. But how does our consciousness come forth? Do you recreate a completely white slate? You don't, right? It's not a blank slate. Your consciousness that springs forth in the morning depends on what you did before that, your entire life, right? So all of your actions, all of your sanskars come forth with you in the morning, right? Who you have been so far. Similarly, when you have a bigger pralay at the end of their lifetime and you're born again, similarly, the consciousness that comes forth depends on what your consciousness was in the previous lifetime. And that's how it is going to be at the end of every Mahayuga also. even when at the night, at the time of Brahma's night, when all of this creation dissolves into Brahma, and in his morning, when that creation comes forth, all of your actions, your antakaran will be of the same quality that it was when it got dissolved, and same sanskars will then come forth. So you have to constantly work on yourself, right? And this is something that we've read before. So you can see it, how it reflects in your daily life by seeing that your consciousness dissolves at night, but in the morning when it comes forth, you are carrying the sanskars of what you have done the previous day. And you carry your life forward based on what you have done previously and what task was left unfinished the night before. You start back on the same things. You are on the same trajectory, unless you do something today that changes the trajectory, right? And then we have, when we say that, there is dissolution at the end of Brahma's day, right? So Nitya Pralay, we've understood the same concept at a smaller level is Nitya Pralay. At the end of Brahma's day, the pralay that happens, the dissolution that happens at that level, we call it the naimatic pralay. Naimatic pralay. Okay. And when Brahma's life comes to an end, the pralay or the dissolution that happens is called Mahapralay. Okay. But the pralay that we are seeking on a daily basis is Atyantik pralay. Atyantik pralay is the dissolution from the clutches of Maya. The dissolution of our desires, the dissolution of our ego, the dissolution of all our attachments, the moh. That dissolution, which then frees us from the clutches of Maya, and this is the dissolution that frees our soul from the clutches of Maya. This is called Atyantik pralay. And Atyantik pralay can only happen when we take the form of human being. Okay, and this is the dissolution, this is the pralay we want to create in our lives. Let's read. Sanchita, would you like to read?
Connection. The Lord now tells about the relationship between commencement of creation and its dissolution with Brahma's day and night.
Avyaktadvyaktayah sarvaha.
Avyaktadivyakta sarvaha.
Prabhavantyah ragame.
Prabhavantyara gamame.
Prabhavantyah ragame.
Prabhavantyahara gamame.
Ratrayagame praliyante.
Ratriyagame praliyante.
Tatraiva vyakta sangyake.
Tatraiva vyakta samnake.
Nice. Avyakta is unmanifest, right? So unmanifest and manifest. Sarvaha, all. Prabhavantya, get प्रभावित होते हैं, प्रभाव लेते हैं, created. Aharagame, in the day of Brahma. Ratrayagame, in the night of Brahma. Praliyante, everything dissolves. Tatra, that. Avyakta sangyake, in the subtle body of unmanifest Brahma.
All beings emanate from the unmanifest Brahma at the break of his day, and when his night falls, they dissolve into the same unmanifest. All embodied beings emanate from the unmanifest. 2 points have been made in this shloka. First, all animate and inanimate beings emanate from the unmanifest power of the Lord called Brahma. This power is activated when the Lord accepts Rajaguna or the attribute of dynamism. The Lord is, in fact, beyond the field of gunas, but viewed through the medium of nature. He appears to be endowed with its gunas. Just as a lamp covered by a colored chimney appears to give light of the same color, similarly, the Lord appears to be endowed with the gunas of nature.
So here, just to highlight, one is it's quite clear that the thing that powers all of us comes from the unmanifest. That is the real. Everything else we experience or associate our identity with is the unreal. It is going to be under the influence of the cycles of birth and death. The only thing that is real is the unmanifest. And that's what our journey is to go and become one with that unmanifest in terms of our identity. The second piece is dynamism and Rajoguna is, so we have three gunas, right? Sat, Raj, and Tam, right? The Rajogun and dynamism is in the driver's seat whenever there is creation. And that is something we would experience on a daily basis, which is why Bhagwanji, before we read this shloka, he's made it very clear that our dynamism and our Rajogun will create action, and we cannot run away from it because we are part of that creation. Bhagwanji also created an action to create all of this. But the only way to reach moksha or self-realization is through action. It is through this dynamism. It is through this, by doing our duty, but not with Rajogun Bhav, but with Satagun Bhav. And that is something we will learn subsequently later what that means, right? Like, but in short form, we understand that we want to act out of doing lok sangra for everyone, rather than act out of desire for the fruits of the action, right? That's the essence. So this shloka kind of highlights those 2 points for us very clearly.
Yeah, just one part there. So exactly what Abhinav said, except that when the creation happens, Rajogun may be in the driver's seat or may not be in the driver's seat, right? When Rajogun is in the driver's seat, then we know that we are hum sansar ke ho gaye hain, right? That time, if Rajogun becomes the driver, then we have stopped doing Bhagwanji ka work, and what we are doing is we are just basically following our desires. Okay, but that's not how it should be. We are created in the Bhagwanji's image. So Bhagwanji himself shows us what is the right way to behave, what is the right thing to do, how to be. So let's see, Brahma, right? Brahma is his Rajoguni aspect, but where does he come from? He comes from Vishnuji's garb. Vishnuji, so if the three gunas, we talk of three deities, Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh. Brahma is the Rajoguni aspect, Vishnu is the Sat aspect, and Mahesh is the Tam aspect. Okay, all of them are divine. Three gunas depicted by three divine deities, right? Now, where did Rajogun come from? Rajogun emanated from Vishnuji's garb. Satogun se hi wood aaya tha. So whenever we get into a creative mode, the creative mode has to start from Satogun. We have to have Satogun in the driver's seat. And then the Rajoguni Bhav is then going to drive whatever Satogun is telling us to do. So Rajogun at the behest of Satogun. Tamogun at the behest of Satogun. Then we are all fine. And that's how the best of the creation has happened by the Lord himself. So he's telling us, he's very, very clear. He does exactly what he expects us to do as well. The laws of the nature apply to his deities too. Everything that has been created in this world has been created in accordance with the law, and he has shown us through a very clear example. He's not telling us to do anything that he himself has not followed. Okay.
Secondly, when all beings dissolve into the subtle body of Brahma, which is the unmanifest, that is called the night of Brahma. Just as day succeeds night and night succeeds day, This process of creation and dissolution goes on endlessly. At the time of dissolution, all beings merge into the unmanifest being and are reduced to their causal state according to their propensities. At the time of creation, they come out of their causal state and blossom forth in their manifest physical states to work out the destiny charted by their propensities.
So this is the other aspect of Tattva Gyan, which was shared with us in chapter 2, which is that when you die, your vasanas, your innate nature, whatever desires you have, whatever fruits of your action that you were attached to, go with you, and you will have to pay for the consequences by coming back to birth, right? By coming back and restarting that cycle. Now, we understood this at an individual level. Now, Bhagwanji is saying this is what is applicable at the micro level is exactly the same Gyan at the macro level. So you can live these lakhs of lives, but if you haven't worked on your antakaran, then you come back. Which is why we keep going on and on about it. Is the only purpose of Gita is antakaran ki shuddhi. Antakaran ki shuddhi. That is the only thing we need to work on to reach self-realization and to identify with the true, the real identity within us, or the real us, right? And this shloka highlights the same thing, that even at the end of it, you don't think you've got respite. Whole world creation, cosmic, the whole world as we know it will dissolve, will go back into Brahman. Don't think you have respite, that, oh, then I'll be one with Bhagwanji. Yeah, you will be for a little bit. But then, depending on your causal body, depending on your sanskars that you've carried forward, when creation happens again, you will have to manifest. And you will have to pay for it. And you will have to experience all the consequences of your actions and your desires and everything else. Right? You won't get to stay in that state of bliss.
As Abhinav said, at a micro level, during the day of Brahma, there's constant small cycles that we have, right? We die, we are born again, die, born again. And the causal body carries forth everything, right? And what was the subtler form of this causal body that we read about at the start of the chapter? Does anyone remember? Where do these sanskars reside? Anyone? Is Adi there?
What is the question again?
Where does the causal body reside? There were these concepts that we read, right? So what is the subtle form of our subtle body that we say? Where do our sanskars, where does our mind, body, and intellect and our chitta, where does it go and reside? What is the subtlest entity?
Mind, body. Is it it starts from gunas or
Adidev.
Adidev?
Right? So Adidev is where our antakaran goes and resides, right? So how is our antakaran carried forward, right? So our antakaran will determine our lives, right? Now at a macro level, as Abhinav said, we determine our actions, and then whatever we are doing as a community, the community's actions, their prarabdha comes together to create a destiny of the community. The country's actions, collective actions, go on to create destinies of countries. Similarly, our collective actions, our collective prarabdha go on to create a collective prarabdha, the collective destiny of Earth as a whole. Similarly, other universes. And this type of collective prarabdha is then going to go into the creation at the end of Pralay, the naimatic Pralay at the end of Brahma's day. And when the new creation springs forth, it will spring forth based on the prarabdha of that creation at the end of Brahma's day. So when his new day starts, that entire creation will live like that, right? So it is not just our prarabdha, but we become part of the destinies of others within the communities we live, within the circles we live, within the countries, and within the larger cosmos. And that this intertwines us with everybody else's behavior, or everybody else's this thing, right? That is why our actions affect others, and others actions affect us more than we imagine. And that is why prayers work. when we have other people in our thoughts, we affect them positively or negatively in whatever way we do, right? Depending on how strong their will is or whatever, we are able to impact others in a lot of different ways. Yeah. Now, what is very important here is to remember that, you know, you get born as per your propensities. This is going to come forth in Shloka 19 and 20. And this is a great reminder of the fact that there is a law of nature and we are affecting these laws, right? The law is created. These rules, once these rules have been set, essentially, we are under their compulsion. We don't have a choice. We don't have a choice. We can't escape out of the rules of this nature. So your actions, it's like basically the rules are set, the program is set, you parameterize it. What parameters you put into it will determine what results you create. Okay. So, but the parameters are in your control. The choice that you have is the parameters that you put into this program. In any other life form, you have no control over the parameters. You are created as a function where the parameters are already set. Okay. So you're born. There is a function that you need to live through, right? Every life form has its own function. And that function will come parameterized with values, pre-parameterized with values. You have to live a life of a dog, for example. Your life of a dog, whether it will be that of a street dog, whether it will be in a village, whether it will be in a, you know, there are dogs that live even in mandirs. What is the quality, the function of a dog is already set. This is what it looks like. These are the behavior patterns. This is who you will be. This is where, but the parameters of where you are born, how you live, what will be the environment in which you have to live that life. These are all set parameters. Okay. And these set parameters are based on your previous life. But in human form, you have a very complex algorithm here, which is more complex than any other life form, which gives you a lot of choices. But the most amazing thing is that you will have your own, you will have your own, like you can actually change parameters. Okay, and that is what is important. The ability to change those parameters is extremely important, and they determine your escape velocity. That's how important this is. That is the power of our life.
Let's read one more.
Who would like to go next? I'm not sure who all are there.
I'll go next.
Okay, Visalakshi.
Connection. Now the Lord speaks of the power which activates this process of creation and dissolution.
Power which activates this process of creation and dissolution. And you see how much of that power resides in us. Bhutagrama sa evayam.
Bhutagrama sa evayam.
Bhutva bhutva praliyate.
Bhutva bhutva pralayakate.
Ratriyagame vashah partha.
Ratrivayagame vashapata.
Prabhavatya haragame.
Prabhavatya paragame.
Bhutagrama is all beings. Evayam, eva ayam, that only, vahi, that only. Ayam is this. Bhutva, bhutva is, bhutva basically means to take, to manifest, to be born. Okay. So to be born again and again, bhutva, bhutva. Praliyate keeps dissolving. Ratri yagame vashaha, under the effect of its own nature. Under the effect of its own nature. Prabhavatya haragame is, Prabhavatya is under the effect of. Haragame, when the dayfall comes, when the night comes, when the dusk arrives.
This multitude of beings being born again and again is dissolved at the coming of Brahma's night, as if under compulsion of its own nature, and comes forth again at the dawn of Brahma's day. Individualized self under the compulsion of its own nature. The coming forth and dissolution of being is totally under the subjection of their own nature, which is built up by their innate propensities and motivated actions. It is this power which completes with to be born in different forms of creation according to the force of their sanskars. Thus, the individualized self is under the subjection of its own propensities, but only in the human forms exists a chance of transcend the cycle of birth and death by adopting the path of any discipline. If this opportunity is not utilized, nature would force it back into the cycle of creation and dissolution.
Okay. So this is what is important, right? We are under the subjection of our own propensities. That is the power. The power that, the nature will impel us based on our own actions. So we are completely in charge. We determine what kind of life forms we will take based on our vasanas. We determine how many cycles we go through based on our own actions, our sanskars, and the prarabdhas that we need to live through. Okay. So in the life form, in human life form, we have the ability to create actions, to create thoughts, to create the type of bhav with which to live our duties through in a way that we parameterize our algorithm to take us out of this cycle of birth and death. Alternatively, we can parameterize it in such a way that we get, bonded for another 1,000 lives, another 84 lakh lives maybe, right? So this is very important to understand that within such a magnificent scale, at such a huge cosmic scale that is so difficult for us to even comprehend, the power that this little liver that liver holds is huge. It's like that tiny liver that will enable an Escobar to be able to raise a very heavy weight, right? It doesn't look likely, but then when you actually see that, it depends on where you place that fulcrum, right? So it's extremely important to use this life extremely importantly. The whole purpose of all of these shlokas is for us to realize how precious this life is and how pathetic a life is if we waste it in just following our desires and living it like an animal. If we continue to live like an animal, at the end of it all, Bhagwan Ji says, okay, this is the level of your consciousness, then go and live that life. This is what you want to experience. This is the most important thing. For example, you're extremely lazy. I'm just giving an example, right? You just want to like sleep all day. Then go take form of a life form that goes and sleeps for very long periods of life, because that's the level of your consciousness. That's what you want to experience. Then go experience it. Experience it in its entirety. Kill that vasana. You've done it so much that after that you're like, okay, now you killed that vasana. Now you want to come back and do something else. So whatever are your vasanas, you will live through them based on those life forms, because they have a level of consciousness. Okay. And it is all in our hands, this little life that we have. And don't assume that it's going to be 70, 80 or 100. We don't know what comes tomorrow. So everything that you are postponing for tomorrow, that Anushtan that starts tomorrow, that Namjat that starts tomorrow, you don't know whether tomorrow arrives or not. You only have today. This is the only moment that is there in your life. This moment, not even the next. Just this moment. Life happens here and now. So what you choose to do, what you choose to engage your conscious thoughts in is happening here and now, and this will determine your gati tomorrow. Okay, so be very conscious of your thoughts right now and what you're indulging in right now. Yeah. You want to close, or do you want to do the next shloka? We can do 20. It's very small. It's basically we've done everything.
I think it's the same concept.
Yeah. So I have already explained it.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So let's do shlok 20 as well. Who would like to go for shlok 20? Rishabh, Naina, you available?
Yes, I can.
Perfect.
The Lord now describes a goal which is higher than Brahmalok.
Okay, so this is the first word here. No, there is an S missing actually in this. Sir is missing. Okay, it should be tasmatu. Okay, not tamatu. So we'll pronounce it like that. Paratasmatu bhavonyah.
Paratasmatu bhavonya.
No. Vyakto vyaktat sanatanaha.
Vyakto vyaktat sanatanaha.
Yas sarveshu bhuteshu.
Yahasa sarveshu bhuteshu.
Nashyatsu na vinashyati.
Nashyatsu na vinashyati.
So par is very far, right? Far or beyond. Tasmatu, tat, and then atu. So that's basically is, the first one is us, that, and the tu is but. Bhavo is basically bhav. Anya, another. Avyakto is unmanifest. Avyaktat is also unmanifest with a different form of verb. Sanatanaha, eternal. Yaha, who. Sir, that. That refers to that divine being, the unmanifest aspect of the Lord. Sarveshu, all. Bhuteshu, beings. Nashayatsu is dissolved. Na vinashyati, does not get destroyed.
Far beyond the unmanifest, there exists another unmanifest, which is eternal and is not destroyed when all beings are dissolved. The supreme unmanifest reality beyond the primal unmanifest nature. Even though primal nature is unmanifest, another unique unmanifest entity is mentioned in this shloka. This is the divine, supreme divine unmanifest, who is without beginning and without end. This is the eternal state of the Lord. When the individualized self merges in this unmanifest, it escapes from the clutches of birth and death. Though both these entities are unmanifest, they are totally different from each other. The primal nature is insentient and perishable, but this divine unmanifest is sentient and eternal. The knower and controller of the primal nature is this divine state.
This shloka is basically explaining to us the difference between Brahma and Brahma. Both are unmanifest, as we realized, but the supreme divine unmanifest is the supreme Lord. He is Nirgun Nirakar. He is Sat Chit Anand, right? Sat, eternal, Chit, consciousness, conscious principle. So that's what's saying that it's sentient, Anand, blissful. But the other aspect that we're talking of is Brahma. Brahma is the Nirgun Nirakar aspect of the Lord, taking on the Rajoguna and hence becoming Brahma. Brahma from Brahma. And so it becomes Sagun Nirakar. And because it becomes Sagun Nirakar, immediately it also becomes subject to the cycles. And that's why we see day and night of Brahma, and then Brahma also ends at a Mahapralaya. Okay, so that is basically what is being described here. And we have to understand that everything that is imbued with any kind of guna is subject to these cycles. So Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, everything that we think about, right? All of these deities are basically representing some power of the Lord. When we pray to these deities and we pray to them properly, then the promise of the Lord is that we start to manifest what this deity represents. Okay, so we start to, for example, Mahesh represents the divine Tamoguni aspect, right? So he's the destroyer, but then he's also the repository of all Gyan, right? So he's the repository of all Gyan. So when we pray to Mahesh, or we pray to Brahma, or we pray to Vishnu, or we pray to Ganeshji, what we are seeking are these energies inside of us. And ultimately, we have to remember that they are only an aspect of the eternal Lord. So through them, we had read in a previous chapter that when people pray to various deities and they pray to them for certain, small petty objects or aspects, we will only get to that deity, right? We won't go beyond that. But if we pray to the deity as a form of the Lord, then we will be able to get to the Lord. That means हमारी गति कहाँ जाएगी, कहाँ तक हम जाएंगे, will depend on the way we pray to the deities, right? So for example, you pray to Ganesh ji for, Ganesh, what do we pray to Ganesh ji for? We say Ganesh ji is what? Vignaharta, right? Destroyer of all obstacles. So we pray to him, please take away difficulties, problems, take away these, adchan in my life, take away these obstacles in my life, right? But what does he really represent? If we pray to him in this gross form, then we will only get to those gross, we will get those gross results, which will have a certain specific life form. Ganesh ji in a subtle form, and this is just an example, right, to help you understand all of these concepts, right? Ganesh ji in their subtle form is Gan Ish or Ganpati, Gano ke Pati, Gano ke Ish, the Lord of Gan. What is a Gan? Gan is basically a samuh. We see na, क्या कहते हैं रिपब्लिक को क्या कहते हैं हिंदी में गण
It's an English term.
Yeah, so basically Gana is samuh or group, right? And everything that comes in our life comes in the form of groups. Senses are groups, our sanskars comes in groups. When we behave in certain way, there are certain types of behavior patterns that come together. And that is why when we start to go with one type of behavior pattern, it automatically makes sure that others follow it in its wake. Okay, so things come in groups. When the Ganesh ji is basically the Lord of the groups that enter us. So when we seek out to him and we say, please remove obstacles, we should be praying to him that remove the obstacles and clean the ganas inside of me. So remove the obstacles on my way that prevent me from controlling my senses, the gun of the senses. And why is he prayed at the beginning of every puja? We have all the stories of Purans, but in subtle form, what are those stories referring to? Those stories are referring to that if I start my upasana, if I start to do something, what is the first thing that will come in? My mind will come and distract me from that thing. Right? It will say, okay, I start a fast or I start an activity which says that, you start a project, say. Something will come and your mind will get distracted, say, let's watch TV, let's do this, let's do that, right? You pray to Bhagwan Ji, to Ganesh, to say, help me control my indris, help me control all my senses, so that I can be single focused in achieving the outcome that I have set out to do. That is why he's prayed at the beginning. So we are seeking control of all those 6 inlets that we have. Okay. And when we pray to him like this, then we are invoking the Lord's beneficence, Lord's grace through Ganesha. We are praying to him as an energy of the larger Lord. Okay. Okay. So I think what we want to do, we are going to close the class right now. And we wanted to close it a little bit early to talk about something really special and something really, really important to all of us. One of the members of our group here, Kakuli, she is going through some health problems. And
as she alluded to us in the class last week.
Yeah, she was asking questions. If you would remember, all the people who attended the class last time, she was asking certain questions that were health related and how to overcome them, right? And as Sanchita just informed us that she has been admitted to the hospital as well. So what we had taken this and we talked to the elders of the family, and they have guided us that we should do an anushtan for Kakuli as an act of Lok Sangraha. But as with all Lok Sangraha, when we do an act of Lok Sangraha, the first recipient of the grace is who? It is us. Okay. So we, our elders of the family of the Gita Parivar have guided us that we should take on an Anushthan of 2 weeks. And the Anushthan is going to involve invocation and recitation of Mahamrityunjay Jap. So Mahamrityunjay Jap is a collection. It's, as you understand, all mantras are they don't really mean as much as they are collection of very special divine sounds. And when uttered in a certain way, these sounds create a very special energy. They create very special vibration. And as we all understand, this entire world is basically energy, right? We are all forms of energy. So when we invoke these mantras in a proper way, they transform the energy inside of us. They transform the energy in our environments. So the intention is that we take on the Anushthan of reciting Mahamrityunjay Jap by keeping Kakuli in our mind and direct the grace of the Lord through the Mahamrityunjay Jap, the punya that we generate out of the energy that we generate out of the invocation goes towards her, right? And through this process, we do several things for ourselves. One, we cleanse our antakaran simply by invoking. When water flows through a pipe, if the water is being used to water certain plants, the first recipient of the grace of that water is that pipe, because that pipe gets cleaned. You cannot push water through a pipe without cleaning the pipe itself. It's an automatic process. You have to do nothing, but even though that is not the part of the process, right? That's not the objective of the process. Our antakaran will be the first thing that gets cleansed as we do the invocation of these the mantras. And by keeping Kakuli in mind and by ensuring that we do a small yagya for her, we are elevating our consciousness of doing something that is beyond ourselves, right? So we are raising our consciousness towards our Anahat chakra and towards our Vishuddhi chakra, right? So we are cleansing and we are increasing our consciousness level. The third important thing that will happen is that this higher energy vibrations that will reach Kakoli will hopefully help her in dealing with what she is dealing and come out of it stronger. So it will improve, it will make our personal connections to divine much stronger. It will increase the divine connection we as a group have, and it will increase the consciousness level of this group itself to a higher level. By taking on, this is the first Anushthan, the first Yagya that we will do, which is called Sahayagya, right? So first Sahayagya is anyway the class that happens, right? So that is the receptacle. This is a Sahayagya we are all doing together. And every time everybody joins in the class, we are creating that is Sahayagya together by doing the sacrifice of our time, of our attention, of the questions we ask, of our consciousness that comes with it, right? So we are doing that Sahayagya. Now, in that big receptacle of Sahayagya, this is the first Yagya we are taking on together for Kakoli. You want to talk about the specifics?
So I just add one more thing and then you can continue. So the Mahamrityunjay Jap, we've been advised by the family members to take it on. What it essentially means is three things, right? So one is it is a prayer to Lord Shiva to ward off calamities, right? Second is for praise for longevity. And third is it prays for strength for whoever we are praying it for to experience and face whatever they have to face in their destiny. What is in their destiny cannot change. But when we go through hardship, it's very easy for us to lose faith and let anxiety, fear, all of these things take over, right? This is just our way of, like Duina said, an offering from our side to help, in this case, Kakuli, strengthen her faith. We've also advised her that she should have a 24 hours, she should have something playing in the background as a namjap. And we've sent that to her at a soft volume so that she's always connected, right? So that her mind goes back to that job, even though she physically will not be able to say it, right?
A family member is also.
Yeah, a family member has also been advised to take on a different job, which she said she will organize. So this Anushthan will start from tomorrow, but we can use today as well. No harm done, right? There, and like Twina said, while this is an act of Lok Sangra, you have to realize you're actually giving out this healing energy and this strength to yourself and your families around you. You're also by de facto giving it to your children, your husband, your kids, your parents, etc. Right? So, and just with all spiritual anushtans, the act that you're doing benefits the other person, but it also benefits you, as Tuina beautifully explained. So it will start next Monday. It will culminate. Coming Monday, tomorrow. It will culminate on September 4th.
Which is our Sunday, right?
Which
so
is our
two classes
Sunday.
From now.
So September 4th class will be a Havan.
Yeah, we'll be conducting a Havan, Purnahuti Havan for the Anushtan. And it will happen at the time of our class. So we will all join together, and we'll of course give instructions on how the Purnahuti Havan will happen. So it will be the first Purnahuti Havan that we will do as a class together. There are many such anushtans that have happened in other classes, including our own class with Kumar. So this will be a very, very beautiful opportunity for all of us to do yagya, and
so the way so the way the commitment makes, right? So we have to say this mantra. The minimum number of times we say this mantra is 108.
That's one mala.
Constitutes as one mala. All right. So we would want a commitment that you make for yourself, right? That I will do X number of malas. I will start that. I will explain all this on WhatsApp and create the roster. You have to just say, I'm going to take up 2 malas a day, or 1 mala a day, or 5 malas a day, whatever you feel comfortable with, right? You have to hold yourself accountable to doing those malas. So suppose you miss doing, your commitment is 5 malas on every day, and on Monday you were able to do only 3, then you make it up the next day by doing 7. But I would strongly recommend, don't make that a habit. And if you do, then that's a very important thing for you to examine in your being and your vasana, right? So if you have a commitment, try and do it daily. And then in the end of the 2 weeks, we will do the Purnahuti.
Yeah, and please let us know in case there are certain number of malas that if you're not able to complete, please let us know, because as a group we are going to take on a vachan, right? And as a group we have to make sure. There are times when some people may get it may become difficult for certain people to execute on their vachan, in which case as a group we will take that on, and we will ensure that the number that we as a group are committing to gets completed, right? So any one of us who will be able to take on that extra from this will be another level of yagya that we will do. But we as a group, we have to make sure that whatever vachan we take, we fulfill on it, right? It's very, very important. That's how we can even trust ourselves, right? Trust ourselves to deliver on anything in the world.
So this is the mantra, as you can see on my screen. I will share this image on the WhatsApp group as well. The way to say it is Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam Urva Rupmi Bandhanat Mrityo Mruksha Mamritat Om Triambakam Yajamahe. So you can just continue this 108 times for it to be counted as one mala, right? You can do, there are many different ways to do a counter. There is counter on phone. There is a physical counter that you can get in Mustafa. You go to any spiritual shop, they'll do it. There's the mala also that people use. You can count, or you can count on your fingers, whichever way that you want to keep count. Yeah. Any questions?
Thanks for actually bringing this in. Like, how is Kakuli now? And it.
So, she her COVID test came negative, and they've got found some shadows in the lung CT. So they're
Oh.
running more tests to figure it out. But prima facie, the doctor told us it could be some other virus, and it's not anything like initially. We were worried whether it's cancer or whether it's blood clot or anything, but they kind of ruled those out. So we're just waiting for all the tests. So some of the reports are going to come today. So and then she's there for another 2-3 days more to do all the other tests. So that's where. So she's better right now, but yeah, but a little. I think she's also like a little scared and with everything going on around her. So yeah, and I was there last week. I just came back. So, I mean, I was there with her when we just went to the doctor. So they gave her medicines, but she was coughing and it was just not going away. So again, when she went back yesterday for a regular checkup, they did those tests and they said, we want to run the CT. And then the CT report was not good. That's when they admitted her.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
but but I think on behalf of Kakoli and the entire family, I just want to thank you all for doing this for her.
Okay.
Perfect.
Cool. You can do closing shlokas now, Kavita.
ॐ सर्वेषां स्वस्तिर्भवतु, सर्वेषां शान्तिर्भवतु, सर्वेषां पूर्णं भवतु, सर्वेषां मङ्गलं भवतु. ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. ॐ सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः, सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः, सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु, मा कच्छेत् दुःखभाग् भवेत्. ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. ॐ असतो मा सद्गमय, तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय, मृत्योर्मा अमृतं गमय. ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. ॐ पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते, पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते. ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. ॐ